My daughter stood up at her wedding reception, took the microphone from the band, and told 200 guests that the old man paying for everything was lucky she still let him sit at the family table. Then she laughed. They all laughed. I sat there in my rented tuxedo with my hands folded on the white tablecloth, and I let her have her moment, because I already knew something she didn't. By the end of the month, the catering bill, the country club deposit, the down payment on the house I'd promised them, none of it would matter. I had made one phone call from the parking lot during the cake cutting, and that phone call would take everything she thought was hers. But before I tell you how I dismantled my daughter's perfect life in 11 days, let me know down in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you've ever been treated like a checkbook by the people you bled for, hit that subscribe button. This one's for you. My name is Otis. I'm 73 years old, and for 41 of those years I ran a heating and cooling business out of a cinder block shop in Akron, Ohio. I crawled through attics in August when it was 110 degrees under the rafters. I lay on my back in crawl spaces with spiders dropping on my face to fix a widow's furnace on Christmas Eve because she had grandkids coming and no heat. I built that company from 1 rusted van to 9 trucks and 22 employees. I sold it 4 years ago for more money than a kid from my neighborhood was ever supposed to see. And every dime of it I had earmarked for 2 people. My late wife, Marion, God rest her, and my only child, my daughter. I'll call her my daughter through this whole thing because I'm not sure I can say her name out loud anymore without something going wrong in my chest. She married a man named Garth. Garth sold luxury real estate, or said he did. Mostly what Garth sold was himself. He had the watch, the leased Range Rover, the white teeth, the firm handshake he practiced in mirrors. The first time I met him, he asked me, before the appetizers came, what my liquidity situation looked like. I thought it was a joke. It was not a joke. It was an interview, and I was the asset. The wedding was at a country club outside Columbus, the kind of place where they charge you $11 for a glass of iced tea and call it house brewed. I paid for all of it. The $40,000 reception, the dress that cost more than my first car, the honeymoon to Santorini. I didn't complain. She was my little girl, and I'd promised Marion on her deathbed that our daughter would never want for anything. So I wrote the checks. I wrote them with a smile. But somewhere in the year leading up to that wedding, something changed in how they looked at me. Or maybe it didn't change. Maybe I just finally let myself see it. It started small. They stopped inviting me to things and then telling me about them afterward, like a courtesy. Oh, Dad, you would have been bored. Then it was the way Garth started talking over me at dinner, finishing my sentences wrong on purpose, making me sound slow. Then it was my daughter correcting how I held my fork at their house in front of his parents. Daddy, we don't do it that way here. Like I was a guest who'd wandered in off the street instead of the man who'd paid for the table he was sitting at. The night of the rehearsal dinner, I overheard them in the hallway by the restrooms. They didn't know I was there, Garth said. Once the house closes, we just keep him at arm's length. He's got, a few good years left? We be nice on holidays. And my daughter said, he's exhausting. The stories, the tools, the way he smells like that shop. But yeah, we smile until the money's ours. And then she said the part that I carried around in my coat pocket like a stone for the rest of that week. She said, honestly, the sooner the better. The sooner the better. She was talking about how long I had left to live. I went back to my table. I finished my dinner. I told them the salmon was wonderful. So when she stood up at the reception the next night and made her little joke about how lucky I was to be allowed at the family table, I want you to understand, I wasn't surprised. I was just done. There's a difference. Surprise is what you feel before you understand. I understood completely. I clapped along with everyone else, and I excused myself to use the restroom, and instead I walked out into the parking lot under a sky full of October, stars, and I called a man named Sol Brennan. No, not Brennan. I called my lawyer. His name was Sol, and I'd known him 30 years, and he answered on the second ring, even though it was 9 at night. "Otis," he said. "Aren't you supposed to be at a wedding?" "Sol," I said. "Open the file." There was a pause. He knew which file. We'd built it together 2 years ago, quietly, the way you build a storm cellar in a part of the country that doesn't usually get tornadoes. Just in case. "You're sure?" he said. I looked back through the big glass windows of the clubhouse. I could see her in there, my daughter, spinning under the lights in that dress I'd paid for, her head thrown back, laughing at something Garth said. She had never looked more beautiful or further away. "The house deal," I said. "It hasn't closed yet, has it?" "Closing's Tuesday," Sol said. "You're still the one funding the down payment. $310,000. Wired into escrow Monday morning unless somebody stops it." "Stop it," I said. "And, Sol, the trust. The wedding gift trust. The 2.1 million. Otis. Freeze it. Tonight. Every dollar." I heard him breathe out. "There's no coming back from this one, my friend." I touched my coat pocket where the stone was. "The sooner the better." "There's no coming back from a lot of things," I said. "Make the calls." I want to tell you about the drive home that night, because I think it's the part that matters most, and it's the part nobody talks about in these stories. I drove the 2 hours back to Akron alone with the radio off. "And I'll be honest with you," I cried. Not gentle crying, the ugly kind, the kind that makes you pull over on the shoulder of the highway with your hazards on because you can't see the lines anymore. I wasn't crying because of what I was about to do. I was crying because of what was already gone. The little girl who used to ride on my shoulders through the hardware store, who used to fall asleep in the passenger seat of my work van smelling like sawdust and refrigerant, who used to call me on Sunday nights from college just to hear my voice. That girl was dead. She'd been dead a while. I just kept paying her ransom, hoping she'd come back. She wasn't coming back. I dried my face and I drove the rest of the way home, and I slept better than I had in a year. The first call came Tuesday morning. The closing on the house had collapsed. The seller's agent wanted to know where the funds were. Garth, I learned later, had already told everyone at his office about the new place. He'd posted about it. Big things coming. He had to walk all that back, in front of the people he most wanted to impress. And a man like Garth would rather lose a finger than lose face. The second call came Tuesday afternoon. My daughter. I let it ring. She called again. And again. By evening, she'd left 11 voicemails, and the arc of them is something I'll remember the rest of my life. The first one was confused. "Daddy, the bank says there's some kind of hold. Can you call them?" The fourth one was worried. The seventh one was angry. The 11th one was the truth coming out from under the costume. "You selfish, senile old man. After everything we do for you, you'll regret this. Garth says we can have you evaluated. We can prove you're not competent. We will take it all." There it was, the thing they'd been planning. If I wouldn't hand it over, they'd have me declared incompetent and take it through the courts. Have a judge decide I couldn't be trusted with my own life's work. Lock me into a system where strangers managed my money and my medicine and my meals, while my daughter and her husband spent it on a house I'd never be welcome in. I didn't call her back. I called Sol. "They want to challenge competency," I said. Sol actually laughed. "Otis, I've got you sharper than 90% of my partners. We did the cognitive evaluation in March, remember? Notarized. Filmed. You named the date. The president counted backward from 100 by 7s faster than I could. If they want to go to court arguing you're incompetent, please God let them. I will frame the transcript." But Sol got quiet then. the way he did when he had something I didn't want. There's more, he said. I had Petey run the background on the son-in-law. Standard due diligence. Otis. Garth's underwater. Bad. The Range Rover's 3 payments behind. The down payment you were giving them? They needed it because they're being foreclosed on the place they're in now. And here's the part that'll turn your stomach. He's got a side arrangement with a fella named Dolan. Dolan? Frank Dolan. No, Sol didn't say a name I knew. He said the name of a private lender, the kind that doesn't have a building, the kind whose interest doesn't go down when you fall behind. Garth borrowed 200 grand against money he swore was already coming. Your money. He told this lender he had a rich father-in-law about to fund a deal. He used you as collateral, Otis. You were the asset he posted. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where Marion and I had eaten 40 years of breakfasts. I looked at the empty chair across from me. There's one more thing, Sol said, and his voice dropped to almost nothing. And I went back and forth on whether to tell you, but you need all of it before you decide how far to take this. Tell me. Your daughter's got an apartment downtown. In her name only. She's had it 8 months. Garth doesn't know. She's been moving things into it, and she's not alone in there. He paused. I've got photographs. She's seeing someone else, has been the whole engagement, the wedding, the house, the trust. Otis, she was never planning to stay married to him. She was planning to take the money and the house and the divorce and walk out the door she'd already propped open. I'm a calm man. 40 years of crawling into dark places taught me that panic is the thing that gets you killed. But I sat at that table for a long time after I hung up. My daughter wasn't just greedy. She was running a con on the man she was conning me to fund. She'd married Garth as a vehicle. Garth had borrowed against me as a vehicle. And I was the engine underneath all of it, the thing that made all their little machines run, and not one of them had ever once considered that the engine might turn itself off. So I turned myself off. Here is what I did, and I did it the way I did everything in my life. Methodically, one system at a time. The down payment was already stopped. Good. The trust was frozen. Good. But the trust, the way Sol and I had written it, had a clause most people never bother with. It said that beneficiary rights could be revoked entirely, with all assets reverting to me, in the event of fraud, abuse, or attempts to interfere with my legal autonomy. Threatening to have me declared incompetent so they could seize control? That was the whole list, checked 3 times. On Wednesday morning, Sol filed the revocation. By noon, the 2.1 million was no longer hers in any sense. It was mine again, free and clear like it had never left. Then I did the thing that I think about most, the thing that some of you are going to disagree with, and I understand that, and I want to hear from you in the comments. I let Garth's debt find him. I didn't have to do anything. I just had to stop being the shield. For 2 years I'd been the invisible promise, standing between Garth and the men he owed. The moment the world learned the rich father-in-law had cut the cord, and Garth himself broadcast it, raging to anyone who'd listened that I'd ruined them, the lender came calling. There was no collateral anymore. There was just a leveraged man in a leased car with a wife who'd already rented an exit. But I'm not a cruel man. I want you to know that. So before any of the worst of it landed, I did one thing that no one in that family ever did for me. I gave a warning and I gave a choice. I drove to their apartment on Thursday, the one they were about to lose. I knocked and my daughter opened the door, and for 1 second, her face did something soft and young, and I almost forgot all of it. Almost. Daddy, she said. I'm going to say this once, I said. I didn't go in. I stood in the hallway. I know about the house you can't afford. I know about the money Garth borrowed in my name. And I know about the apartment downtown and the man who isn't your husband. The color went out of her like water out of a tipped glass. I'm not here to scream at you, I said. I'm too old to scream. I'm here to give you something none of you ever gave me. A way out. Tell me the truth, all of it, right now, and tell me you're sorry and mean it, and I will help you. Not him. You. I'll get you clear of the debt, I'll get you somewhere safe, and we will try, you and me, to build something real out of whatever's left. But you have to choose it, right now, on this doorstep. I watched her think. That was the worst part. I didn't watch her feel. I watched her calculate. I saw her run the math behind her eyes, the same way Garth ran it the night, by the restrooms, the same way she'd run it at the wedding with the microphone in her hand. She was weighing whether an old man's mercy was worth more or less than the play she already had in motion. And she chose wrong. You can't prove any of that, she said. Quiet. Cold. The soft young thing in her face was gone like it had never been there. And if you try, Garth and I will have you in front of a judge so fast. You're a confused old man, Daddy. Everyone will believe it. Now go home. She shut the door. I stood in that hallway for a moment. Then I walked back to my truck. I still drive a truck, a real one. And I sat in it, and I called Sol, and I said, send it all to Dolan's people. The whole picture. He needs to know exactly who he's married to before he decides what to do. And then I said the harder thing, and send the photographs of the apartment to Garth. Tomorrow at 5, after the lender's already moved. I want him to lose his footing, and then find out the floor was never there to begin with. Otis, Sol said, you sure? I thought about a hospital room 4 years ago. I thought about Marion's hand in mine. The IV taped to it, her voice thin as paper. I thought about the promise I'd made, that our girl would never want for anything. And I understood, sitting in that truck, that I'd kept the wrong promise. Marion never meant give her everything. Marion meant raise her into someone who'd never need to be given everything. And I'd failed at that, and the failure was mine, and there was only one thing left I could do that might still count as love. I could stop. I could refuse to fund the worst version of her for one more single day. She gave the daughter a chance, I said, talking about myself in the third person without meaning to. The way you do when you can't quite stand to own a thing. She didn't take it. So now there's just the father and the truth and whatever they do with it. Send it, I said. All of it. 11 days. That's how long it took, start to finish, from the microphone at the wedding to the morning I'm telling you about now. The house deal was dead by Tuesday. The trust was gone by Wednesday. The lender came for Garth by the weekend, and I won't tell you the details of how that went because honestly I don't fully know them, and I don't want to. The marriage came apart on Sunday when the photographs landed. My daughter went to her apartment downtown, and the man who wasn't her husband, I'm told, did not stay long once he understood there was no 2.1 million attached to her anymore. Funny how that works. The people who circled the money scatter the second the money's gone, and what's left standing in the empty room is just the person, alone, finally seeing what they actually had to offer the world, which, in her case, turned out to be very little. She called me one more time, the 12th voicemail, you might say, except this one I listened to all the way through. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It wasn't soft either. It was just flat, hollowed out. I don't have anywhere to go, she said. Garth's gone. The apartment lease is up next month, and I can't make rent. I don't, Daddy. I don't have anyone. A long silence on the recording. I don't even know who I'd be if I called you and meant it. And do you know what? I almost called her back. My thumb was over her name. 41 years of being a father doesn't switch off because you're hurt. The instinct to catch your child when she's falling is older than your good sense, older than your dignity, older than your pain. But I remembered the doorstep. I remembered that I had already opened the door with both hands, and she had looked at the way out I was offering and decided that destroying me was still the better bet. You can forgive a person who wronged you in a moment of weakness. that she'd had her moment of mercy handed to her, gift-wrapped, on a Thursday afternoon, and she'd thrown it back in my face, the same way she'd thrown that joke at me through a microphone. Mercy isn't something you owe twice. I put the phone down. I didn't call her back, and that was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, harder than the crawl spaces, harder than burying my wife. I let my own child fall because catching her one more time would have killed the last true thing left in me. I'm not in Akron anymore. I sold the house, the real one, mine and Marion's, a couple months after all this. Too many empty chairs. I bought a little place down in the Tennessee hills near a lake with a porch that faces east, so I get the morning on my face. I take my coffee out there. I fixed the neighbor's heat pump last week and wouldn't take a dime for it. And his wife brought me a pie, and we sat on that porch and talked for 2 hours about nothing, and it was the best afternoon I'd had in 10 years. People will tell you blood is thicker than water. I built my whole life on that idea. But blood is just blood. It doesn't make a family. What makes a family is the choosing each other, again and again, on the ordinary Thursdays when there's nothing in it for anybody. My daughter stopped choosing me a long time before she ever picked up that microphone. I just kept choosing her, out of habit, out of grief, out of a promise I'd misunderstood. And the bravest thing I ever did at 73 years old was finally stop. If she ever comes to me as a person instead of a plan, empty-handed, no angle, just my girl wanting her father, that door is open. It always will be. I'm not made of stone, but she'll have to walk through it carrying nothing but herself, and I have made my peace with the very real chance that she never will. I sat on my porch this morning and watched the sun come up over that water, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I didn't feel like an asset. I didn't feel like a checkbook or a burden or a confused old man somebody was waiting out. I felt like Otis. Just a man who did honest work, who loved a good woman, who made one last hard choice and lived. If you believe a person's dignity isn't for sale, and that the deepest kind of love sometimes looks like letting go, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe and tell me down in the comments about the moment you finally stopped paying somebody's ransom. I read every one of them. We're all out here on our porches, friend. Might as well watch the sun come up together. For 41 years, I thought love meant writing checks. I crawled through attics and frozen crawl spaces so my daughter would never feel cold the way I had, and somewhere along the way I confused providing with parenting. That was my mistake, and I own it. A child who is handed everything and asked for nothing learns that people are faucets, not human beings. You turn them on, you take what pours out, and you walk away. I built that lesson into her one comfortable Christmas at a time, and then I acted surprised when she stood up with a microphone and treated me like the hired help. The cause was mine long before the consequence was hers. But here's what I've come to understand, sitting on this porch in the mornings. The kindest thing wasn't the money. The kindest thing, the last real act of fatherhood I had left in me, was refusing to fund the worst version of her for one more day. When I stood on that doorstep and offered her the truth and a way out, I wasn't being weak and I wasn't being cruel. I was doing the hardest math a parent ever does, weighing what she wanted against what she needed and choosing the second one, even though it broke my heart. Garth chose the leased car and the borrowed life, and the men he owed found him. My daughter chose the angle over her own father, and the angle left her alone in an empty apartment. None of that was revenge. That was just the bill finally arriving at the right table. If you take anything from what happened to me, take this. Raise people who can stand on their own, not people who lean until you fall. Teach a child to be honest when lying would be easier, because a person without a spine of decency will sell anyone, even the one who loved them most. And learn, the way I had to learn far too late, to see clearly even when seeing hurts. I spent 2 years paying my daughter's ransom because I refused to look directly at what she'd become. Wisdom isn't being smart, it's being willing to know the thing you don't want to know, and then when you finally know it, you need the backbone to act. That part nearly killed me. Letting your own child fall when every instinct screams to catch her takes a kind of strength nobody warns you about. But I found it at 73 in a truck outside an apartment I'd never be welcome in, and I have never once regretted it. I don't hate her. I want to be clear about that. The door is open if she ever walks through it, carrying nothing but herself. But I'm done buying my way into a family that only existed on paper. I did honest work. I loved a good woman. I made one last hard choice and I lived. That, it turns out, was always enough.